Kluck. I live at Mud Butte, South Dakota, and passionately believe in the Constitution of the United States, and believe that the three elements of freedom is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness or property, because that's the way it was termed in the discussion at the original Constitutional Convention.
And you came packing this morning, and you came packing the Constitution.
Yes, and that's that's what I say. I'm passionately involved in it. The book you're talking about is House Document 398, The Formation of the Union. It was compiled in 1927 by the Elder Lindbergh. It's the discussion in the original minutes of the original Constitutional Convention in our founding fathers, Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington. I've also read about 5 volumes of the Letters of Washington, and if I could find the other 12 volumes, I would read them too. Very interesting information.
Well, you're definitely a well-read man, and this book that we're talking about is sitting on the table. I'll get a picture of it for you guys later, but it is extremely large. Let me get a look at that.
Just 650 pages.
650 pages. I lean across and heft this giant book with the seal on the front, but the pages are yellowed, and it's been well taken care of, though. It looks like really good stuff. So I want to pick up a copy of this giant thing at some point. So one of your big stances also, aside from the Constitution, is you are pro-Second Amendment, correct?
That's the 3 elements of freedom, like I say, are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness or pursuit of property. Life is, that's the reason I'm pro-life. It's essential to our whole reason for having a country. Liberty, if we read the Constitution, it says the right to bear arms is necessary for a free state. It isn't necessary to provide hunting or self-defense even. It's necessary to maintain a free state. So that part is our pro-gun as far as our liberty is concerned. And the pursuit of happiness, originally, like I said, was the pursuit of property. And I will vehemently defend our property rights and the right to property, because that is one of our elements of freedom.
Absolutely. Well, just a little bit more on that pro-Second Amendment, because I did notice something in one of your sheets, and it said, you mentioned that many infringements of the Second Amendment remain in place. What are those?
Now, run that by again.
Oh, you said that many infringements on the Second Amendment remain in place. What are those specifically?
Well, and I think we're referring to more than just South Dakota there, but also in South Dakota there are laws limiting the ownership of guns. The concealed carry permits and this kind of thing. It goes beyond that, and I'm not really against the concealed carry permits, but what I am saying is there's more restrictions on ownership of guns.
Gotcha. And you've heard about the School Sentinel program?
Yes.
What's your thoughts on that?
It's kind of mixed. The thing of it is, I think if we're going to have, and I'm not opposed to teachers having guns, but I think they also should understand the use of guns and the proper application of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, extremely important. So you have a background, you were president of the South Dakota Stockgrowers Association, correct?
Yep, just got out of that last fall, yes.
Tell us about that. What was that like?
It brought more awareness to me. I probably wasn't the best president in the world, because I also run a ranch, and so I wasn't as involved as I should have been, but it also brought a lot of awareness to what happened down in Pierre. Not that I haven't been watching it for years, but I've been a member of the Stockgrowers since 2001, and that's one of their things, is to watch the political process and how it affects the livestock industry.
What were some of the roles in that position? I'm not sure that I know exactly what that looks like, what that job entails specifically.
Well, we take care of the general business of stockgrowers like any president would do. We also lobby down at Pierre and are involved in the political process quite a bit. We also, even though we no longer have the brand inspection program, we deal with the brand board and the rules that entail our brand thing. And on that list, I put together a meeting with Fred Lamphere and in the Sheriff's Association, and I was very surprised at that meeting that we was expecting 3 or 4 sheriffs to discuss different ways we could improve the brand inspection program. And there was 15 sheriffs there, including 3 or 4 of them from East River, where the brand inspection is not in place.
Really?
And I was very impressed with that. We had a wonderful meeting. The DCI, head of the DCI was present, and he came to Bill Hutchinson's, who is the stock growers president of the brand committee, and came to us and said, he said, you know, this meeting has been an eye-opener, because he said, you guys have addressed many problems that I wasn't aware of, and a lot of times we've kind of considered the stock growers an antagonistic group and not, you know, really out to get things done. And he said, you've totally changed my opinion of that. So I was very happy with that meeting.
Wow, that's excellent. The 15 sheriffs, that's quite a number when you're only expecting a couple of them.
That's right. The brand board was present. The DCI had their presence there. It was a wonderful meeting.
Oh my gosh, well that's great. Because you were mentioning about that, let's see, I have that. You had sent, I saw on your Facebook page, you had sent a letter to Governor Dugard. I'm still so new to this state, I apologize. President Dugard about low calf crop prices and increasing property taxes, but he never responded to you.
Yes, I was very disappointed that he didn't. I sent it as president of stock growers, and we pointed out the drop in calf prices. This letter was written in January of 16, and I pointed out the drop in prices from 14 to 15, which was about $500 per head, and what that impact of that drop would have on the income within the state, and also the tax revenue and the you know, impact of the state budget with that drop. And I also in there addressed the fact that the stock growers had a lot of good people on our board, and that we had some ideas that could probably help with that. And that's one of the reasons I was very disappointed that he didn't respond in any manner. On that note, I'm going to bring something up here that I wrote in the Rapid City Journal the other day. And during the last 8 years of the Dugard administration, which is where he's been there, we have lost an average of 100 farms and ranches per year in South Dakota.
Wow.
We've added 126 new employees every year, state employees. Now, we've also increased our budget by $105 million per year every year since in the last 8 years. And I think that direction has to be changed, and that's one reason that I'm running for the Senate.
Oh my gosh, those are some staggering numbers to think about. And it's not like those people who no longer have farms are going to work for the government in that 100 individuals.
Yes, that's correct. And you know, the thing about it, nationwide, our RCAF statistics show that we've lost 75,000 feedlots in the last 20 years. And that is essential for competition in our cattle market.
Right.
And that's there again, this is all related to the stock growers and what I've done with them.
Yeah.
I went with Bill Bullard, and on a speaking tour, I was not the main speaker, I was just saying raw for Bill Bullard, but we met with 1,400 people on that tour. I can't remember, was it a year ago? I think it was a year ago, because and it was in the wintertime. And we had a really good, you know, response to that.
That's great. How do you follow up with something like that if the governor doesn't respond to the letter? And what's your next step? It seems a little disheartening at that point.
It was, and we did not really follow up on it. I mean, how do you, you know? And that was, yeah, we certainly would have liked to have, in some manner. We tried to do a few things, but we just couldn't get any response.
Yeah, are you hopeful that the next governor may have a little bit more of an ear tilted your way?
Yeah, I think whoever gets the governorship of Kristi Noem, Marty Jackley, and Billy Sutton that's running on the Democratic ticket, I think that they will respond well to the stock growers and their views and the livestock industry. You know, irregardless of what you think, our livestock industry is our #1 industry. Farming, ranching, period, is a big part of our economy, and I think we've got to address the fact that we're losing our small farms and ranches, which I think is essential to our country.
Right, absolutely. Well, that is good. Let's see here. So we've talked a little bit about the Constitution and how important that is to you and how much you studied it. It really seems like you studied it. Is that true to say?
You know, it's on my own. I'll admit that. I've read a lot of books, and I back a pocket Constitution with me all the time to remind myself that you know, I forget things as well as everybody, and I want to be constantly reminded. You know, the Constitution is a contract with the people with government,
Yeah.
and when we break that contract, we're violating our oath of office, and that's very important to me.
Right. Alrighty. Well, let's see here. You just got done with branding. Did I hear you say that when you walked in?
No, I was at my son-in-law's. I'm going to brand the 13th, but anyhow.
Okay, your son-in-law.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of brandings, as many ranchers are this time of year, and it's a great time. I love to rope and drive the calves and get the community involved, and that's a big part of ranching to me,
Yeah.
and so I enjoy that.
Well, there's another one of those tradition aspects you were talking about. Your district, 29, is huge. And it seems really like it would be diverse. Am I correct in assuming that?
It is, and in that point, I'll bring up some other things that I think are interesting. You know, going back a few years, the National Ag Statistics showed that the central western region had 45,000 milk cows in it, and the hog industry was huge at that time. Our sheep were a big item. You know, Newell used to be recognized as the sheep capital of the nation.
Oh, yeah.
And
I've heard some people have even moved from sheep over to cattle in that area.
Many of us have. And you know, that's the point is now we have 500 cows, milk cows, in that same region. Our sheep numbers are 1/4 of what they were then. Our hog numbers are just practically nil. You know, and at the same time, our state is saying that we got increased production and we need to pay more taxes. So where do they come up with these figures?
Absolutely. So have they turned to cattle instead, or are we just losing that production?
Actually, no. That's a very interesting subject because our cattle numbers are down slightly from what they were then.
Okay.
The only numbers that are up are horses. You know, which is, you know, that's fine. I like horses too, but, you know, it isn't a driving economic factor.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen that that change in how much horses are being sold for and the difficulty in selling them because we're not eating them, which is fine by me. But yeah, I agree with that production. That's interesting that the numbers in horses have went up. The breeders and everything too, or just?
Yeah, it's partly the fact that we have more and more people that just have small acreages and have a couple, 3 horses, and that's great. I believe in small farms and any part of agriculture. You know, that's one issue that on the horse issue, my son-in-law does rent out the horses to the dude ranches since we were just branding there yesterday, and he runs about 150 horses.
Wow.
So he's got an unused situation there. So I know the horse industry a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, sounds like it. Well, with all the people in District 29 and the problems it faces, how do you listen to all those different voices? Is it an office phone call? Is it a visit?
I love to visit with people, as you may notice, but yeah, I've been around. The stock growers were a good avenue for listening people, but I believe in listening to the people in town too. I mean, we have a lot of issues that if people look at them closely, they may come from agriculture, but they affect everybody in the district.
Right.
You know, I had a teacher call me the other day because she was at a meeting where I spoke, and I was real disgusted with the way the state handles the gambling money and the money spent for teachers and so forth, and the half-cent sales tax increase and so forth. And she was going to speak to some of her teacher friends and make them understand that, you know, I'm not anti-education. I did have my kids schooled in a private or, you know, a religious school because of the moral values. But
well, that's our right to choice.
That's just exactly right. That's part of our freedoms. Now, but at the same token, you know, I would like to see everybody make a good wage. One of the issues that I have in that point is that you know, when I go to sell my fat cattle, which I used to feed quite a few. They tell me I'm in a global market, but when they hire state employees, do they ask them, you know, what's people in Brazil making?
Yeah, let's be competitive with their wages.
Yeah. It's just a point. We've got to understand if they expect the farmer and rancher to be in a global market and export our product, how do we compete with those people that make virtually nothing compared to what we have to live?
Right.
And it's just a point that I think people all across the district need to understand.
Well, is there any way that you see the global market working in our favor a little bit better in the future?
It can, but I don't think we want to be afraid of tariffs for the very reason that I just mentioned. We cannot compete with Brazil on our beef. For instance, their whole refrigeration program, their packing industry, we had a problem with tainted meat. And I've been to some of them South American countries, and I'll tell you something, they're not near as particular as we are.
Yeah.
And so I think we want to protect our farmers and ranchers, and I'm a very big advocate of the country of origin labeling because of that reason. I think we raise a great product here. We carry it through through the packing plants. It's well regulated. I mean, there's always issues, but at the same token, we've got the safest, best product in the world. Why can't we label it as such?
I gotta ask you then, because I have not, have you ever tasted side by side, like maybe a South Dakota Black Angus compared to a Brazilian one?
Brazil is bringing their standards up for their cattle. Actually, Brazil AIs a larger percentage of their cattle than we do, and they have a lot of cattle. So their genetics, that part of it is improving, and we've got to recognize that. I don't mind it being in competition with that.
Yeah.
What I do object to is all the other things that are entailed in it. And yes, I have done that. The thing about that, we ran some surveys on the East Coast, and were written by several grocery chain owners that, when we had the country of origin labeling, they were having a terrible time selling foreign beef.
Yeah.
And they were having to drop the price on the foreign beef, and that's not all bad.
Well, if people know and they can make an informed decision
choice.
and try them side by side, well, then that's great. But at least they have the information to make that decision.
That's right. Now, the beef that I tried that was foreign beef was grass-raised beef.
Okay.
And even in the United States, your grass-raised beef, although healthier, is probably not going to be of the same quality as your grain-fed beef. And I raise some of both and provide beef for people, so I'm familiar with that.
Great. Alrighty. What do you have anything that you want to mention first and foremost? I got questions for days.
Just fire away. We'll talk as we go.
Alrighty. Well, okay, this one's kind of funny. You've used the term rhinos, but not the savanna-dwelling, grass-grazing pachyderms. And the rhinos you refer to certainly aren't endangered. So could you expand
We have
on
a few too many of them, and that's an issue that I think I want to be careful with it, because of the fact that I really believe that we have Democrats and we have Republicans that can agree on some issues.
Right.
And when we can agree on something, I think we ought to work together. However, I am not going to submit my principles as a means of getting something done.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel has happened with a lot of our Republicans. They are conservative in name only. My opponent has voted 44 times for tax increases in the 4 years he's been there, and that is not conservative.
And by your opponent, you mean incumbent?
Gary Kamat.
Yeah.
And now, don't get me wrong. Personally, I have nothing against Gary. We went to high school together. Have known him since then. And as a businessman, he's fine. But people got to realize he's not a conservative, and although he is toting himself as that.
Well, again, we don't want to be on the attack, but the numbers that we're talking about are coming from the 2017 South Dakota Senate Conservative Scorecard, and this lists the state senator, what they voted on, all the different bills and everything else, and then their total score of how much of conservative. And so down the line here, we're looking at, if we see Gary Kamak, Republican, and he got a 41.9% for a total score. And can you explain exactly what that means?
Well, he voted for conservative vote 41%, and that is the 2017 conservative list. The 2018, it was about 20%. That is one of the reasons I'm running, because I believe the people in District 29 are conservative as a whole. And I think they would, if they really look closely at his voting record, they're going to say, he isn't conservative. And so you know, that's where I'm coming from. And there's been many bills down there in the last 2 or 3 years that he's even got up and spoke on the floor and say, most people would expect me to vote against this, but I'm going to vote for it. And this is the thing we don't need. You can't sacrifice your conservative principles just to get along. And at the same token, when Jim Peterson brings up an actual use bill on our property tax that says grass will be taxed as grass and cropland as cropland, I think, yeah, since he was the head of the tax task force at that time and suggested that to the legislature, and then I think we should have all been behind that, especially the members of that task force, which Gary Kamak was part of.
Well, let's make sure people know what we're talking about with that, because we were talking about it a little bit before we came on air, and that, explain that a little bit more, because you're saying that if you have something that is not cropland, it's being taxed as cropland regardless, correct? Right.
If the soil rating is good enough, and in my own personal instance, which I will use because I know that, I have about 40% of my place that is just barely into the cropland rated soils. But that 40% is being taxed as if it's raising wheat, corn, or whatever. And that raises the taxes considerably when in actuality it's been in grass forever. And that to me is just an injustice.
Why have they not been able to rectify this situation?
We went to the production-based tax in 2009, and I've been involved in those meetings from 2007 on. And one of the things that I've suggested in our grassland situation, which much of western South Dakota is grassland, that we should be using our state school and public lands formula, which is a very good formula, which was established in the 70s. And it's worked very well for the school and public lands to lease their ground. And what that basically says is they take a 5-year average for the calves, price-wise, at a certain weight. I think it's $5.50 or something, and then use that as a benchmark and a 5-year average to establish the production value of that ground. They then take the carrying capacity of the ground, which basically is your soil ratings and your soil's ability to produce grass, and they multiply that out, and then they take 25% of that value and establish that as the base lease. Then they have an auction, and you have the opportunity to establish the base lease if you've been leasing it, and then it goes from there. If somebody else bids against you, then it goes up. And but the formula itself is very sound, and it's been in practice for many years, and I think it should be looked at. Right now, they're using supposed rental rates. The thing that I don't understand is the fact that since 2009, my taxes on 5,000 acres has went from $6,000 to $16,000. And at the same time, your rental rates have only creeped up about 10%. And so they're to me, there's something the matter with our formula when it says that. We met with the Department of Revenue in February, and one of the things that I offered to Mike Howdyshell, who's head of the Ag Division of the Department of Revenue, I said, you've established the market value of grassland at $1,191 in Meade County. I said, if you're going to establish that price, I want you to write a check for my place today. He didn't get his checkbook out.
Duh.
And that's the kind of thing that we've got to stop. They can't use false figures to establish stuff. And to me, that's what they're doing.
There's a lot of accountability that needs necessary there, it seems like, and if people looked at the numbers a little bit, they might have an opinion change, but that's good that you're getting the information out there. Speaking of accountability, government corruption in South Dakota, you've got a pretty strong stance on that.
Well, you know, there's a rating, and I'm not sure where that came from, but they're rating South Dakota as the 3rd most corrupt state in our union. And I want to see that change. Accountability, transparency in our government. I do think South Dakota has some very real opportunity in the many other states don't have. And we got to take advantage of those opportunities and work them up so that we're not taxing our homeowners and our ag people to death. And I think there's room for work there.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any sort of work that you would like to do in the state senate right away? What's the first and foremost? These are the things I'd like to get done.
You know, I've been exploring, and when I talk about the opportunities the state has, I've been exploring different avenues. I really hate to speak on it at this point because I haven't got the research done. But you know, I think there's a possibility that we could reduce property taxes across the board and actually enhance the revenue to the state. The other thing is the corruption part. We really have to examine that. I know of several other people that are in the legislature now that feel the same way. And the figures that I give you earlier on the number of employees and the number of ranches we're losing and so forth, that's essential to that, because if we tax our people too much, it discourages business. It discourages new enterprises in agriculture. We've got to stop taxing our people off the land.
Yeah, absolutely. I still can't believe that 100 farms a year lost.
That's despicable in my name. You know, we need more farmers, not less.
And then wages as well haven't really risen a whole lot.
I agree. And the thing of it is, there again though, we can't expect one segment of our economy to get nothing and raise the wages for our state employees. To give you an example of that, the very land that I'm talking about on my place in 1979 was $1,553 worth of taxes. Today it's $16,000. Now that's a 1,000% increase. At the same time, our calves have only went up about 100%. We can't maintain that. We've lost all of the other agriculture that I've talked about with the dairy industry, and even our cropland harvested acres are down to what they used to be. And we can't, the reason they are, the price isn't there. People can't make a living with it.
And that 1979 figure you're talking about, where it was about $1,500 in property taxes, up to, what was it, 15,000 or 16?
16,000.
I looked at the inflation rate for 1979 because you said cows back then $100 per hundredweight.
Yep.
200 now. The inflation rate does not account for that.
No.
That massive property tax increase. I think it was about $100 back then equals $349 in today, if I'm remembering right. But yeah, it's not the inflation that's changing those numbers. Those really did exponentially increase.
That's right.
So fact checking, and you're right, buddy.
Well, I'm glad you've done your research.
Yes. Let's see here. That's main. Yeah, I wanted to touch on the government corruption thing. Everybody seems to be pretty hot on that standpoint. Especially, we were talking about briefly too the global aquaponics issue that came up in the public broadcast debate this last week. Let's see here. Who else? Dusty Johnson, Chantel Krebs, Tapio. They had another big debate on public broadcasting. Any opinions on how that went? You said you were getting phone calls off the hook while it was happening.
Yeah, I did. I tried to watch it, and I didn't succeed. And what I did see was very interesting. Actually, there was points brought up by all the participating members that were real good. The global hydroponics thing, I'm out of tune on that one. I don't know really what you're talking about.
Oh, the global aquaponics.
Aquaponics?
Yeah, this is where it's allegedly been called a scam corporation that was set up that Jack Lee broke ground on, and then his name's been entangled with this issue as well. So
yeah, and that is a big deal, and there again, I know just enough about it to be the dangers. And there, a lot of this stuff, you just have to do a lot of research on it, and I'm willing to do that work. But at the same token, I don't want to speak out of turn.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. I just barely dug into that last night too, and that was my first introduction to it. District 29, is there anything that you really want to tell the folks that we haven't told them already that you want to get across to them?
We have a lot of issues in District 29. It'll be interesting this election. In my study of the Constitution, one of the things that I want people to understand is The original founders set this country up that the House of Representatives would represent the people. That's great. That's where it should be. And for that reason, they were elected by the majority of the people. The Senate, they were supposed to represent property. And property tax is a big issue for me because I feel it's being unjustly administered. And one of the things that comes back to that is our senators were supposed to be appointed by our House of Representatives, our U.S. senators. The state senators were supposed to be appointed by our commission. There was supposed to be a senator for every county in the state.
Really?
And along with that, at the founding of this state, our assessors were elected so that they would represent the people, not the commission or the state. And I think we have to look at that closely, and the first step would be to make the assessors elected. I did introduce a bill to that effect, had a person introduce it for me 2 years ago, and there was a lot of opposition from the assessors and counties. And I think they have to understand that I was empowering that assessor, not taking power away from them. And there again, there was a lot of discussion about, we'll be campaigning all the time, won't have time to do our job. There's no one in our government that requires more training than probably our sheriffs.
Yeah.
And yet they're elected, and very few of them get turned over all the time. If they do a decent job at all, they're in there for a long time. And I think the assessors would be the same way, but it would give them the authority to say no to the county and no to the state. This is the way I see it, following the law. And I think that's an important step. That's one of the things that I'd like to do for District 29.
Well, that's fascinating. One more thing I want to talk about too. See, this is show and tell time here with Kluck and I. He's brought so many goodies with the book and everything else. But you got a letter here, and let me tell you, this guy opens envelopes from the side, which personally I'm a fan of. I think it distinguishes people. Are you the kind of person who cuts the top off or does that side open thing? He's a side open guy, if that has any bearing on your political attitude at all, which it shouldn't. But this is from the National Association for Gun Rights. And this says, "Dear fellow patriot," it's actually addressed to you, "as a Second Amendment supporter and a concerned citizen, you need to be informed about the important issues facing your community." It goes on, or this letter came to you, but it's addressed to people. It says, "The good news is that Bill Kluck answered his NAGR, National Association for Gun Rights, candidate survey 100% pro-gun." But there is, and it goes on to say, Bill Kluck has pledged his support for solid pro-gun, constitutional carry legislation. Bill Kluck has also pledged to vote for legislation to protect South Dakota from Obama's unconstitutional anti-gun restrictions. But there is bad news for District 29. I'm quoting this all from the NAGR paper. Senator Gary Kamak refuses to answer his gun rights survey. The National Association for Gun Rights has been conducting surveys on candidates across the country for many years. That's just a little excerpt. This thing has got about 4 pages to it from Dudley Brown, president. Is there anything else I'm missing in this? It seems like they gave you 100%.
Yeah, I've had several endorsements. I brought another card there for you that came from, what was it, the National
American Liberty?
American Liberty, and they're basing that on taxes and my stance on different issues that keeps our front country free. Excessive taxes are an anti-liberty thing. That's all there is to it. And so that's I was real pleased to get that. There was a group, and I misplaced that card, but there was a group out of Pennsylvania that sent me another card that basically was endorsing my stance on conservative issues and taxation. And I was very pleased that came. It was the Coalition for American Taxpayers is the name of the group.
Okay. Well, this one here that we were just talking about, the one from American Liberty Network, it says you vote to oppose any tax increase and pledge to vote for lower taxes. I'm sure if you get elected, we can hold you accountable to that one.
If you don't, I'll be disappointed.
Okay. And then also supports the rule of law and will fight illegal immigration in South Dakota. Also opposes so-called sanctuary cities. Opposes in-state tuition for illegal aliens. You do have a stance on that. I was reading that South Dakota should not be a sanctuary state.
I'm firmly believe that. The thing of it is, and I'm in danger of saying I'm racist or something. I was raised in the Vale community, and at that time the sugar beets were a big thing, and there was many legal Mexicans that came up to work, and I knew many of them. I was friends. I didn't know that I wasn't a Mexican until I was 15, and I really enjoyed the people. And so I'm not opposed to Mexican workers.
Yeah.
The other thing that a few years ago I visited with the National Union with the Meat Cutters Union, and they were almost all of South American origin.
Yeah.
And they were all here legally. And you never heard anybody that opposed illegal immigrants as much as they did. They said, we've worked for our status and we want to take advantage of it.
Sure.
And I think they're perfectly right in their assessment.
Yeah. Well, just anything illegal from speedings. Illegal.
If it's illegal, don't do it.
Yeah.
And we all violate that occasionally, but
I was looking into that a little bit, and actually I found a 2017, it's called 24/7 Wall Street, reviewed data on the presence and prosperity of immigrants in each state and ranked all 50 based on their favorability for foreign-born residents. Guess who ranked number 1? California. Okay, guess who ranked dead last?
South Dakota.
Yes, South Dakota.
Yeah, and that's disappointing. I also sat in on a meeting of the Consumers for Prosperous America, their board of directors meeting. I was just an observer, but I was very impressed with those people and their stance on immigration and so forth. I never even thought that would come up.
Sure.
But because they are a consumer group, that is part of their people. And I was very impressed with that.
Good deal. Let's see here. This says stand strong against forced taxpayer handouts to special interests. That sounds good. What exactly does that mean? Because that's a lot of political jargon for simply what?
Well, and I'm going to say this kind of tongue in cheek, but we have got a program where people can get tax exemptions for 6 or 7 years, and that has been applied to many of our corporations. That's another thing. If you study the founding fathers, they were very anti-corporate.
Yeah.
And the reason for that was that the Hudson Bay Company was solely owned by the King of England. And it was totally tax exempt and did not compete with the rest of the people, nor provide a tax base for different uses and services.
Yep.
And so we want to be careful in granting tax exemptions to Cabela's and Walmart. I'm not against corporations, and I'm not against them corporations.
Well, there's a difference between tax breaks and tax exemptions.
Yep.
Do you think so?
Yes, oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And that's one of the issues that came up last session is there's a lot of exemptions on different ag products, and we've lost so many of them now, and many of them are the retailers have the same exemption, and it makes it almost a discriminatory tax, and so that was one of the issues that I was very disappointed that we didn't that we lost all of those exemptions, or a lot of the exemptions.
Yep.
And agriculture is struggling right now. I talked with the banking association, and our bankruptcies in Nebraska and South Dakota on ag properties were up 50% in 17 over 16. Those same people, the Nebraska guy especially, said that he expected to be up 100% in 18 over 17. We can't afford to lose more agriculture.
Yep. Sounds like it. Is there anything else you got for a wrap up? I'm out of questions.
You're out of questions?
I think I covered everything I wanted to ask you specifically.
I think today you've given me a real good opportunity to present myself, and I'm more than willing to discuss it with people if they want to call me.
What's the best way to get in contact with you? If they got a question, come directly to you. Facebook or?
I don't use the Facebook. I have a Facebook page, but
it's got some info on there, but you're
right.
not spending all day messaging.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I'm not Donald Trump, but anyhow, You know, my phone is the best way.
Okay.
The cell phone definitely, because the other one is, I'm not in the house usually. But anyhow, my cell phone number is 645-8773. I'm more than happy to talk to anybody in District 29 that wants to discuss this stuff.
That is a very brave man putting his phone number out over the radio to discuss issues. I don't think I've ever seen that in my life before. But
Well, I want to represent people as
Yeah.
well as the property, and you know, the only way you can do that is to know the issues and people's feelings on them.
Perfect. Okay. Well, is there anything else you got?
I pretty well covered it, and I really appreciate you guys for letting me on this interview and letting me get my message out.
Yeah, and thanks for coming so much, and thanks to everybody who's come in so far and will be coming in to discuss the issues. We will get back to Laura Ingram here for a little while. Should have a video up here that I took of Bill Kluck. If you've missed any of it and would like to see it on our website, that'll be available later. But for now, we will say goodbye to you, and we will get you back to Laura Ingram. All right, we'll see you next time. And tomorrow, don't forget 9 a.m. Karen Wagner. She is running for Butte County Commissioner, and at 10 a.m. her opponent, James Ager, running for Butte County Commission, both on the Republican ticket. We'll get a Democrat in for you one of these days. I'm sure somebody will say yes at some point. So thanks again, Bill.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody for listening.